The rain hammered against the windshield of Daniel Morrison's Toyota Camry as he navigated the slick streets of downtown Chicago. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in March, and he was returning from yet another late meeting at the accounting firm where he'd worked for the past 15 years. The dashboard clock glowed softly in the darkness, and he thought about Carla, probably already asleep in their Oak Park home, 23 years of marriage. That's what crossed his mind in the split second before the 18-wheeler ran the red light. The impact was catastrophic. Metal screamed against metal, glass exploded into 1,000 glittering fragments, and Daniel's world went dark. 3 days later, in the sterile corridors of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed Daniel's chart with a furrowed brow. Multiple surgeries, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury, the list went on. In room 3017, machines beeped steadily, monitoring the fragile thread of life that kept Daniel Morrison tethered to this world. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Chen approached the woman sitting in the waiting area. Carla Morrison looked up from her phone, quickly sliding it into her designer purse. Her makeup was flawless despite the circumstances. Her blonde hair perfectly styled? Yes, doctor. Any news? Your husband is stable for now, but I need to be honest with you. The next 72 hours are critical. We've done everything we can, but Dr. Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. You should prepare yourself for all possibilities. Carla nodded, her expression unreadable. I understand. Thank you, doctor. As Dr. Chen walked away, Carla pulled out her phone again. A text message glowed on the screen. How much longer do we have to wait? Jake, she typed quickly. Doctor says 72 hours. Start preparing the papers. In the law offices of Brennan and Associates. Attorney Jake Brennan leaned back in his leather chair, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He'd been having an affair with Carla Morrison for 8 months now, and everything was falling into place. Daniel's accident, while unfortunate, presented an opportunity they hadn't expected to come so soon. Linda, he called his paralegal, I need you to prepare divorce papers for Carla Morrison. Grounds, abandonment and mental instability. Linda raised an eyebrow. Abandonment, but isn't Mr. Morrison in the hospital? Jake's smile widened. He's been emotionally absent for years, according to Mrs. Morrison, and as for mental instability, well, head injuries can cause all sorts of personality changes. We're simply protecting our client's interests. What neither Jake nor Carla knew was that 6 weeks before the accident, Daniel had sat in a very different law office, reviewing documents with his attorney. Margaret Walsh, you're sure about this, Daniel? Margaret had asked, sliding the updated will across the mahogany desk. Daniel had nodded grimly. I hired the investigator like you suggested. The evidence is conclusive, but I'm not ready to confront her yet. I need time to think, to figure out if our marriage can be saved, and if something happens to you before then. Then these provisions go into effect immediately. The letters, the evidence, everything gets revealed. I won't leave my life's work to someone who betrayed me. Margaret, not after everything I've sacrificed. Back in the hospital, Daniel lay unconscious, unaware of the storm brewing around him, unaware that his wife had already mentally spent his life insurance money, had already picked out new furniture for the house she planned to keep, unaware that she visited him not out of love, but to maintain appearances while she orchestrated his legal demise. But deep in the maze of his injured mind, Daniel was fighting to wake up, fighting to live, fighting to return to a world that was about to reveal its true colors in the harsh light of a courtroom. The machines continued their steady rhythm, marking time until the moment when Daniel Morrison would open his eyes and change everything. Chapter 2. The Awakening and the Discovery. 6 weeks had passed since the accident. The cherry blossoms outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital had bloomed and fallen, carpeting the grounds in pink petals. Inside room 3017, something miraculous was happening. Daniel's fingers twitched first, then his eyelids fluttered. Dr. Chen happened to be making her rounds when the monitors showed increased brain activity. Mr. Morrison, can you hear me? She shone a pen light into his eyes, watching as his pupils contracted. Daniel? His voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. Am I? You're in the hospital. You've been in a coma for 6 weeks. Don't try to move too much. Dr. Chen couldn't hide her smile. This is remarkable. I need to call your wife. Carla double quotes Daniel whispered, and something in his expression shifted. The fog was lifting, and with it came memories, not just of the accident, but of the weeks before, the strange charges on their credit cards, the late nights when Carla claimed to be at her book club, the way she'd flinch when he touched her. No, he said more firmly. Call Margaret Walsh, my lawyer. Dr. Chen frowned. Are you sure? Your wife has been. Please. Daniel's eyes were fully alert now, despite the pain medication. It's important. 2 hours later, Margaret Walsh sat beside Daniel's bed, her expression grave as she updated him on what had transpired during his coma. She filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Daniel claimed you'd been emotionally abusive, that your obsession with work constituted abandonment. She's asking for the house, half your retirement, and alimony. Daniel closed his eyes, processing this information. The will, safe and unchanged. The investigator's evidence is all documented and sealed. But Daniel, there's more. Margaret pulled out a folder. Jake Brennan is representing her. He's also named in the investigator's report as her affair partner. Daniel finished. I remember. God, I remember everything now. He looked at Margaret with determination. When's the hearing? In 3 days. But Daniel, you're in no condition to. I'll be there. His voice was steel. Even if I have to wheel myself in. She thinks I'm either dead or too weak to fight. She's wrong on both counts. Meanwhile, in Jake Brennan's downtown condo, Carla paced nervously by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. You said he'd never wake up, she hissed into her phone. The doctors said severe brain damage, that even if he survived, he'd be a vegetable. Jake's voice was smooth, reassuring. It doesn't matter. We've already filed. He's been unconscious for 6 weeks. That strengthens our abandonment claim. And with a traumatic brain injury on record, any testimony he gives can be questioned. But what if he remembers? What if he knows about us? How could he? You've been careful. Besides, Illinois is a no-fault divorce state. Infidelity, a grounds for denying divorce anymore. Relax, baby. In 3 days, you'll be free and wealthy. But Carla couldn't relax. Something nagged at her, the way Daniel had looked at her in the weeks before the accident. Quiet, observant, like he was waiting for something. She thought about their early years together. Daniel working 2 jobs to put her through nursing school, only for her to quit after 6 months because it was too stressful. Daniel missing his father's funeral because she'd planned a non-refundable cruise. Daniel, always Daniel, giving and giving while she took and took. When had she stopped loving him? Or had she ever truly loved him at all? Physical therapy was agony. But Daniel pushed through it with single-minded determination. His body had atrophy during the coma, but his will had only grown stronger. Each painful step was fueled by a mixture of heartbreak and righteous anger. His roommate, an elderly man named Earl recovering from hip surgery, watched with admiration. You training for a marathon, son? Something like that. Daniel grunted, gripping the parallel bars. I have a very important appointment in 2 days. Must be some appointment. Daniel's jaw tightened. It's a date with Justice Earl, 23 years in the making. That evening, Margaret visited again with final preparations. The judge has agreed to review your will as part of the divorce proceedings, given the unusual circumstances. Everything is in place? Daniel nodded, then asked quietly, Did you bring what I requested? Margaret handed him a garment bag. Inside was his best suit, the charcoal gray one Carla had bought him for their 20th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on him. Are you absolutely sure about this, Daniel? We could settle out of court, avoid the drama. No. Daniel's voice was firm. She didn't just betray our marriage, Margaret. She tried to rob me while I was fighting for my life. That ends in 3 days, in public, in front of a judge. As Margaret left, Daniel stared out his hospital window at the glittering Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Carla was probably with Jake, planning their future with his money. They had no idea what was coming. The city lights blurred as tears finally came. Not tears of sadness, but of grief for the death of an illusion. The marriage he thought he had never really existed. But from its ashes, something new was rising. Daniel Morrison, survivor in more ways than one. Chapter 3. The Courtroom Revelation. The Cook County Courthouse stood imposing against the gray April sky. Daniel Morrison adjusted his tie with slightly trembling hands, not from nerves, but from muscles still recovering from 6 weeks of inactivity. He leaned heavily on his cane. Margaret Walsh at his side. "Remember," Margaret whispered as they approached the courtroom doors, "let me do most of the talking. You're here to make a statement with your presence, not strain yourself." Daniel nodded, but his eyes were fixed ahead. Through the narrow window in the door, he could see the courtroom filling up, and there, at the plaintiff's table, sat Carla. She looked beautiful, he had to admit. She wore the navy dress he'd bought her for their anniversary 2 years ago. Another calculated move. No doubt, Jake Brennan sat beside her, his hand resting possessively on the table near hers. Not quite touching, but close enough to make a statement. "Ready?" Margaret asked. "I've been ready for 6 weeks," Daniel replied. The doors swung open. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Carla's face went white, then red, then white again. Jake Brennan's confident smile faltered. "Daniel," Carla's voice was barely a whisper. He walked slowly, but steadily down the aisle, each tap of his cane echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge Jake. He simply took his seat at the defendant's table and folded his hands. "Your Honor." Jake Brennan was the first to recover. Standing quickly, "We weren't informed that Mr. Morrison would be appearing today. Given his recent medical condition, we question whether he's competent to." "Mr. Brennan," Judge Patricia Hawkins interrupted, her voice sharp. "Are you suggesting that a man who walked into my courtroom under his own power is incompetent? Do you have medical documentation to support this claim?" "Well, no, but..." "Then sit down." Judge Hawkins turned her attention to Daniel. "Mr. Morrison, I must say I'm surprised to see you here. Your wife's attorney led us to believe you are still incapacitated." "I'm very much capacitated, Your Honor," Daniel said clearly, "and I have something important to present to the court." Margaret stood. "Your Honor, given the unusual circumstances of this case, the divorce filing while my client was in a coma, the claims of abandonment against a man who was physically unable to abandon anyone, we request permission to present evidence relevant to the character of this divorce." "Objection." Jake shot up again. "This is a simple divorce proceeding, not a criminal trial. Character evidence is irrelevant." Judge Hawkins leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Brennan, when someone files for divorce claiming abandonment while their spouse is in a coma, I think character becomes very relevant." Objection overruled. "Continue, Ms. Walsh." Margaret opened her briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, 6 weeks before his accident, my client updated his will with specific instructions. Given that divorce proceedings could nullify certain provisions of that will, we believe it's relevant to these proceedings." "This is highly irregular," Jake protested. "So is filing for divorce from a comatose spouse," Judge Hawkins replied dryly. "I'll allow it." The court clerk took the envelope and handed it to the judge. As she broke the seal, Daniel finally looked at Carla. She couldn't meet his eyes. "This will," Judge Hawkins began, "is dated February 15th of this year. It includes several sealed attachments." She looked up. "Mr. Morrison, do you wish these to be read publicly?" "I do, Your Honor. My wife wanted a very public divorce. She should have a very public revelation." Judge Hawkins opened the first attachment. As she read, her expression grew increasingly stern. "This is a report from a private investigator documenting an extramarital affair between Carla Morrison and ... double quotes." She paused, looking directly at Jake Brennan, her attorney, Jake Brennan. "The relationship apparently began in August of last year." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jake's face had gone pale. "Your Honor, i.e. Mr. Brennan, you're representing a client with whom you've been having an affair. That's a severe ethical violation." Judge Hawkins continued reading. "There are credit card records showing purchases of jewelry, hotel stays, even a planned vacation to Cabo San Lucas scheduled for next week." Carla sank lower in her chair. But here's the most interesting part, Judge Hawkins continued. Text messages between Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Brennan dated March 20th. That would be 3 days after Mr. Morrison's accident. Mrs. Morrison writes, "The doctor says he might not make it. Should I start moving assets now?" Mr. Brennan responds, "Wait until he's dead." Cleaner that way. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Daniel felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. This was the woman he'd loved, the woman he'd built a life with. "There's one more document," Judge Hawkins said, her voice softer now. "A letter from Mr. Morrison to his wife, to be read only if something happened to him." She cleared her throat and began, "Carla, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone or unable to speak for myself. I know about Jake. I've known for months. I kept quiet because I hoped we could work through this. That counseling might help us find our way back to each other. I was wrong. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed, heartbroken, but not hateful. We had good years, and I choose to remember those. But I won't let you profit from betraying our marriage. The house is mine. I paid for it with inheritance from my father. The retirement accounts are mine. I earned them through years of 80-hour work weeks while you pursued your interests. I'm leaving you the car you love so much and $50,000, enough for a fresh start. That's more than you gave our marriage in its final years. I hope you find happiness. Carla, I hope Jake makes you happy in ways I apparently couldn't. But you won't build that happiness on the ruins of my life's work. With regret for what we've become, Daniel." When Judge Hawkins finished reading, Carla was crying. Not the pretty, delicate tears she'd perfected over the years, but raw, ugly sobs. "Your Honor," Margaret said quietly, "we also have evidence that Mrs. Morrison accessed my client's business accounts while he was in a coma, attempting to transfer funds. We've prepared charges for attempted fraud." "No," Daniel spoke up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "No charges. I just want this over." He struggled to his feet, leaning on his cane. "Carla, you get what the will says. Nothing more, nothing less. Sign the papers, take your money, and go live your life. But know this, I survived. Not just the accident, but this betrayal. I'm going to rebuild my life, and it's going to be beautiful. Without you." Judge Hawkins nodded slowly. "Mr. Brennan, I'll be reporting your conduct to the Illinois Bar Association. As for this divorce, I'm granting it immediately on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Property division as stated in Mr. Morrison's will. No alimony will be awarded to either party." She banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned." As people filed out, Carla approached Daniel. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Daniel looked at her one last time. "I know," he said simply, "but sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Goodbye, Carla." He walked out of the courtroom, each step steadier than the last. Behind him, Carla stood alone. Jake had already fled. She'd gotten exactly what she'd planned for, a divorce, money, and freedom. But somehow, it felt like she'd lost everything. Chapter 4. Rising from the ashes 6 months later, the October sun streamed through the windows of Morrison and Associates, illuminating the controlled chaos of a thriving accounting firm. Daniel stood in his new office, no longer needing the cane, but still moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned not to take mobility for granted. Mr. Morrison, his assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door frame. "Your 2 o'clock is here. Also, Dr. Chen called to confirm your final follow-up appointment next week." "Thank you, Jennifer. Send them in." As she left, Daniel looked around his office, smaller than his old corporate one, but entirely his. After the divorce, he'd taken his settlement from the firm where he'd been partner and started his own practice. It was risky, starting over at 48, but the accident had taught him that playing it safe wasn't really living. His client entered, a young entrepreneur seeking help with her startup's finances. As Daniel listened to her plans, he felt the familiar satisfaction of building something meaningful. This was what he'd lost sight of during those final years with Carla, the joy of creating rather than just maintaining. That evening, Daniel attended his weekly support group at Northwestern Memorial. Not for divorce, but for traumatic brain injury survivors. He'd initially resisted Dr. Chen's suggestion, but the group had become an anchor in his recovery. I still get the headaches, shared Marcus, a construction worker who'd fallen from scaffolding. But they're getting better. My kids say I'm more patient now than before the accident. Sometimes our brains rewire in unexpected ways, said Dr. Lisa Park, the group facilitator. Trauma can actually lead to post-traumatic growth. Daniel, you mentioned last week you were thinking about sharing your story. Daniel nodded. I've been writing, not just about the accident or the divorce, but about rebuilding, about choosing to see betrayal as a chance to become who you really are, not who someone else needs you to be. Would you read some for us? Asked Sylvia, an elderly woman recovering from a stroke. Daniel pulled out his notebook. This is rough, but the morning I woke up from my coma, I thought I'd lost everything. My health, my marriage, my faith in love. But losses, I've learned, are just spaces waiting to be filled with something better. My body healed stronger than before because I finally had a reason to fight. My business thrives because I'm building it for me, not to impress someone who'd already checked out. And love, well, I'm learning to start with loving myself. The group applauded softly. Marcus wiped his eyes. Man, that hits home. After the meeting, Daniel grabbed coffee at the hospital cafe, a ritual he'd maintained since his discharge. The same corner table, the same black coffee, but everything else had changed. Daniel Morrison. He looked up to see a woman with warm brown eyes and silver-streaked hair. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. I'm sorry. She laughed. I'm Elena Vasquez. I was your night nurse during your coma. I probably look different out of scrubs. Recognition dawned. Elena, of course. Please, sit. How are you? I'm well. Just finished my shift. I have to say, you look amazing. When you left here 6 months ago, double quotes, she shook her head. We weren't sure you'd ever fully recover. Neither was I, Daniel admitted. But sometimes the worst things that happen to us clear the path for the best things. They talked for an hour. Elena told him about her own journey, widowed 5 years ago, raising 2 teenagers, working nights to put them through college. Daniel found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in months. I should go, Elena finally said. But Daniel, I'm really glad you're doing well. You deserve it. As she stood to leave, Daniel surprised himself. Elena, would you like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere that serves better coffee than this. She smiled. I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Daniel received an unexpected letter. Carla's handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel, I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed you to know. Jake left me 2 months after the divorce. Apparently, the thrill was in the secrecy, not in the reality. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I destroyed the best thing in my life. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or another chance. I know those ships have sailed. I'm writing to thank you. Thank you for not pressing charges. Thank you for the $50,000 that let me start over. Thank you for showing more grace than I deserved. I heard about your new firm. I'm glad you're thriving. You always were stronger than you knew. It just took almost losing everything for both of us to see it. Be happy. Daniel, you've earned it. Carla. Daniel read the letter twice, then filed it away. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of how far he'd come. Through his office window, he watched the Chicago skyline light up as dusk fell. The city looked different now, not just a place where he worked and survived, but a place full of possibilities. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena, still on for dinner Saturday. My daughter insists on meeting the man who's made me smile at my phone like a teenager. Daniel typed back, wouldn't miss it. Fair warning, I might smile like a teenager too, as he prepared to leave the office. Daniel caught his reflection in the window. The man looking back had scars, some visible, some hidden. But he also had something he'd lost long before the accident, hope. Judge Hawkins had been wrong about one thing. The true testament wasn't what was revealed in character. It was what you chose to build after everything was revealed. And Daniel Morrison was building something beautiful from the ashes of his old life. Outside, Chicago waited with all its promises and perils. Daniel locked his office, straightened his tie, and walked into the night, not running from his past, but walking steadily toward his future. The accident had nearly killed him. The betrayal had broken his heart, but sometimes, being broken is just the first step to becoming whole in ways you never imagined possible. And for the first time in years, Daniel Morrison was genuinely, authentically, whole. The end epilogue. 2 years later, the wedding was small, intimate, held in the garden of Elena's childhood church. Daniel stood at the altar, watching Elena walk down the aisle with her children on either side. Marcus from his support group stood as his best man, while Dr. Chen sat in the front row, wiping away tears. As Elena reached him, she whispered, "No comas this time, okay? No comas," he promised, taking her hand. Just life. Real, messy, beautiful life. In the back row, unnoticed by most, Margaret Walsh smiled. Sometimes the best legal victories weren't won in courtrooms, but in the lives rebuilt after the verdict. And Daniel Morrison's life was proof that justice could be the beginning of something wonderful, not just the end of something broken. As the couple exchanged vows, the October sun broke through the clouds, bathing the garden in golden light. It felt like Chicago itself was blessing this second chance at love, a love built not on youth's passion or desperate need, but on the solid foundation of two people who'd learned that the best relationships begin when you're already whole. The judge pronounced them husband and wife. Daniel kissed Elena, and in that moment, the last ghost of his former life finally faded away. He'd lost everything once. Now, he had everything that mattered, and it was more than enough.